Good morning, Bruce, and how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you, Cindy. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for joining me. And I do love that you're called the King of Sales. So could you just briefly go over your background and who you are and why you and why sales?
You want to know where that quote came from?
Yep.
Well, many years ago, when I was full-time in sales, I was employed by a company who turned out to have a very bad reputation, but nobody knew about it until it actually folded. But during the time I was there, it was called the Levitt Group. And Roger Levitt turned out to be an absolute crook.
Huh.
He was boasting to all the press, always seeking fantastic publicity. He was boasting to the press that he had salespeople earning $1 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the journalists from the Times newspaper, John Ashworth, he said, I'd like to spend a day with one of these people, obviously with the intention of destroying them. And he spent a day with me, and he said at the end of the day, he said, Bruce, I was here with you today so that I could write the most scathing article and completely destroy you and the Levitt Group's reputation. He said, but I'm going to refuse to do that. He said, because you seem to be totally genuine. We've had a great day. We've met some of your clients and some of your potential clients. I won't write the article.
Oh.
6 months later, the Levitt Group went into liquidation.
Wow.
It turned out that Roger Levitt had been stealing millions from clients and doing all the most terrible things. And the following morning in the Times, there was this huge double-page article. The top half was him destroying Roger Levitt, and the second half was Bruce King, King of the UK Salesman. And a really nice article about me.
Oh, wow. And that was beneficial and helpful then?
So that's how it came about. And actually, for quite some time, I used to use that quote in some of my publicity material. And then I got a letter from the Times newspaper's lawyers to say, you can't use the name of the Times, it's copyrighted, cease immediately or else.
But that's where it came from.
Yes.
Okay.
So you said your first question was actually tell you a little about my background. My original background, or my original first proper career, was in fact in alternative medicine.
Okay.
I actually wanted to be a doctor, but I failed all my exams.
Okay, doctor, sales. Yeah, I can see the relevance.
An awful lot of there was only 2 or 3 colleges that were actually doing courses on alternative medicine at the time because it wasn't exactly popular. I think you had a better opportunity making a living as a witch doctor than an alternative medical practitioner in those days. But nevertheless, I got a degree in nutrition, and then I studied acupuncture, and I got very involved in personal growth strategies. But I found it very difficult to make a living.
Oh.
As I say, it would have been easier as a witch doctor in those days. And after a few years, I just gave up. And by a bizarre series of coincidences, I ended up in sales.
Okay. So you fell into it like most people into a profession that they actually end up staying in.
Yeah, well, in those days, and I think it's to some extent still quite a similar situation. If you're prepared to work on a commission-only basis, then it's not that difficult to get a job in sales.
Okay. True.
I don't know if it's quite the same nowadays, but in those days, they'd take anybody.
I guess that depends on the company, doesn't it? But then how would you define selling?
I define selling, my favorite definition of selling, which I wrote over 20 years ago, was exposing companies and individuals to problems they maybe never knew they had, and to opportunities they maybe never knew existed, and then showing them how your idea, product, or service can help them solve those problems or exploit those opportunities, and helping them to buy. Which is really, it's the modern day equivalent of consultative selling. And that's what I always did. I mean, make no mistake about it. When you're working on a commission-only basis, you want to get the business in as quickly as you possibly can. But coming from the background I came from, high-pressure selling was not exactly something that I was going to be keen on doing. So I had to find my own ways of doing things.
So, of course, actually, that links very nicely to the title of Think and Grow Sales, because of the way that you've defined selling is this whole exposing the company and the company in a pain to the client.
Yes. Yep. I mean, Think and Grow Sales, the reason you decided actually to call this little session Think and Grow Sales was because I couldn't think of anything. And then I said, but my latest book is called Think and Grow Sales. And you said, that'll do.
Well, it's all relevant for being sales, because I think there's a lot of salespeople out there that are so poor. So with your kind of book and the Think and Grow Sales, how would that help them?
Are you talking about the book or my philosophy in general?
Both. Let's split it down.
Okay. Well, my philosophy in general, I mean, it's very much based on the fact that, for many years I was involved in personal growth strategies and coaching people on personal growth strategies before most other people were really doing it. And I remember in my very first sales position, and I was doing really well, really quickly. There was a whole bunch of people in this office of about 35 salespeople who said, how do you do this, Bruce? How do you do this? And I said, if you want to come in 7:30 every morning and spend 20 minutes with me, I'll show you how I do it. And I had them sitting down for 20 minutes doing visualization exercises.
Okay. And it
worked. I mean, there's that old saying, I think it was Henry Ford who said there's two types of people in this world. There's those who think they can and those who think they cannot, and they are both right. That doesn't actually apply quite so accurately when it comes to sales, because there's an awful lot of salespeople who think they can and they cannot.
Like, for example, I mean, there's a lot of salespeople that will actually kid themselves that they can actually do the selling. But how would I know that I'm not one of them? Or how, as an employer, can I spot the fakers or the people that have an oversized ego?
Well, as an employer, and if we're talking about people who are already working with you, you have presumably established realistic sales targets, and you know whether people are meeting them or not. Personally, I hate the word sales target. I never use it with my own sales teams or when I'm coaching other people's sales teams, because you know what happens when an arrow hits a target? It stops dead. And so do most salespeople. Very often when they're even getting near their target, they stop. So I replace target with minimum acceptable sales performance.
Okay, that's clever.
That aside, either they're meeting their targets or quota, or they are not. Interesting thing is that even when you have a sales company, a group of salespeople who have been taught a defined selling process that is proven to work, less than 50% will hit target or quota.
Okay.
And 76. I was reading a really interesting report a little while ago, and I can't remember who it was by, but it was a very well-known, very prestigious organization who had interviewed over 200,000 people over a period of time. And I loved the way they summarized their results. They said 76% of salespeople suck.
So told it how it is. But we know that on the outside anyway, because most of the time you kind of go somewhere and you're being sold to by somebody who, if they just ask that basic bottom question, they'd know they're wasting their time.
Yeah, one of the first questions I ask in my new book, because it's not the normal chapter after chapter, thousands of words. It's 52 things. You ask yourself these questions, think about these short paragraphs every day for a week. And the very first one is, would you buy from you?
But wouldn't you find that quite a few of the egotistical kind of salespeople, those that say, yes, I'm a brilliant salesperson, yet you kind of secretly think they're not, wouldn't they say yes to that?
Maybe 18% of people would.
Okay.
Because about 18% of salespeople are pretty good. The rest of them, I doubt it.
Right.
Be honest. The whole point of doing this exercise is so you can improve, so you can think and grow your sales. So would you buy from you? If the answer is no, what are you going to do about it?
So you've either got to get into the headspace or get out. That's a good question. Very good. So how would somebody get themselves into the headspace if the answer is no?
They'll either have to ask their employer for training, for coaching, or they'll have to do what I did and have to go out and find it for themselves. When I first went into my first sales job, I had a week's training on the products at head office, but nothing about sales. And I knew nothing about selling.
Goodness.
Not formally anyway, not any formal sales training. And when I got into the office on the very first day and said, okay, Mr. Branch Manager, what do I do now? He literally threw a copy of Yellow Pages at me and said, get on the phone and start calling people. I said, what do I say? He said, figure it out for yourself.
Great trainer.
And that was it. So I read every book I could find. I was reading a book every 2 or 3 days. I was buying cassette tapes in those days. Brian Tracy's stuff and various other people's stuff. I was at my own expense getting myself onto sales training workshops. And I learned everything I possibly could as fast as I could. But then
wouldn't you be, it wouldn't be surprising then to say that out of the 76% that suck, most of them would not be doing what you did, which is actually going to find out how to do their job.
Well, then a lot of it comes back to the companies they are working for. The companies they are working for, no, they are not hitting targets or quota or minimum acceptable sales performance in my case. It amazes me that they put up with it. Why don't they put in proper coaching programs? Why don't they send them on sales training courses if they're not capable of delivering that training for themselves? Why don't they help them? You see, the incredible thing about being in sales is that salaries and bonuses and commissions are geared towards the average pretty awful salesperson, just about being able to make enough money that they won't quit. Right. So if you're half decent at sales, you can make a lot of money. And if you're really good, you can make a fortune.
But that comes back down to the question of the employer and when they hire, because I don't know about you, but I've gone for job interviews and they've passed a pen to me and said, right, sell me this. And that's part of the process. And you kind of think, well, I'm here because you've asked for certain attributes. You didn't tell me I had to be a fully fleshed salesperson immediately. Yet the part of the sales process is they're assuming that you've already got those skills.
the whole recruitment process is a bit of a disaster. It starts off, they put an advert somewhere, maybe in the newspapers, maybe on LinkedIn, various other places, and they get a whole pile of CVs, resumes through. And they have a quick flick through them and pull out the ones that maybe there's a slight appeal. You might just as well divide the pile in half and put half in the waste paper basket and go to the other half, because it's about as effective. So that's the first stage. So they pick through the resumes, they pick out a few people that they like the look of. Very few companies, particularly the smaller companies, the SME, will do any form of behavioral analysis. And personally, I would never hire anybody for any position without doing a behavioral analysis first. It tells you so much about a person. The other challenges, because that's a solution. The other challenges is, okay, they sort a few people out there, maybe chat to them over the telephone, and then they bring them in for an interview.
Right.
And most sales managers or sales directors are not very good at interviewing. So what happens at the typical interview process is that they make up their minds in the first 2 minutes whether they like this person or not, and then spend the next 3/4 of an hour to an hour justifying their decision.
There's a lovely comment from Laurie in the side saying that folks are never that are doing part of the interviewing and the companies and employing. Not quite a lot of them are not actually in sales, so trying to look for another salesperson often then falls on the job of the sales manager. But before they get to that process, the HR have already deselected who could be the actual best people in the world because they're not in sales.
Some HR people are extremely good at interviewing. I'm working at the moment with a CEO of a big Swedish company. We're doing some coaching with me. And he's in this really difficult situation where at the moment he is generating 80% of the sales of his company, and a substantial amount of sales. They're not a small organization. And he has a couple of people doing some telephone appointment setting for him, and he's desperate to get hold of a good salesperson.
I think most companies.
He's got very limited budgets, but he wants the top person, and he's absolutely hopeless at interviewing. And this has been going on. I mean, it got to crisis point when he was ill for 3 weeks last year, and no sales came in at all. I said, Frederick, we've got to deal with this. You have got to get some sales support. You can't be a one-man band when you're turning over millions a year.
Yes. You've got to have succession.
So this is millions of kroner, by the way, not millions of pounds, but it's nevertheless a substantial amount of money. I persuaded him to hire on a part-time basis a really good HR person to do the initial interviews and the initial screening. And I've been teaching him how to interview salespeople.
Right.
He's still got the challenge that I don't think he wants to pay them enough.
But at least he's on the right path and not spending the rest of the time justifying that he actually likes them. I can understand that.
Because the biggest challenge is that according to all the statistics I've read, and as I think I've mentioned to you before, I think it was Mark Twain who said there's lies, damn lies and statistics. But in spite of that, all the statistics I've read say that 64% or more of salespeople fail.
As high as that? Goodness.
Yeah. So when you're a smallish company and you're only looking for one or two people, You've got to get it
No,
right.
I know that one.
And then we have all the other challenges that go along with interviewing, because apart from the fact that, as I say, most people make up their minds in the first few minutes and then ask all the questions that they need to ask to justify their decision, they don't really know how to interview salespeople properly. And what often tends to happen is that the sales manager will be quite an extrovert, and as a result of that, will automatically be attracted to very extrovert people who are not necessarily very good salespeople.
Is that because we get confused as to what is a salesperson? Because as Laurie actually pointed out, saying sales is not viewed as a real profession. So we're not actually taught about sales, or it's not sort of like, I want to be a salesperson. As a career interview back in school, you don't get... you get training for it to be an accountant, you get trained to be a lawyer, but you don't get sort of like that option, I want to be a sales, so therefore nearest you get is business studies and marketing.
The very word sales is enough to put most people off.
We all have to do it as a business.
Yes. So what was your question? Sorry.
Sorry, we'll move on. So you're sort of like saying about with getting the salesperson on board that aren't actually sales.
I mean, you mentioned about sell me a pen. That's actually a very good question. Or sell me a wallet, or sell me this glass of water. But it's what happens after that. The questions that happen after that. So the questions after that should be, okay, so tell me, how did you think you did then? And if somebody is prepared to be open and honest and express the fact that, well, I didn't have long to think about it and I could have done a lot better, you know that you've got somebody who's probably open to being coached. And then when you give your opinion back to them of what you thought of their presentation, if they're prepared to accept that, acknowledge it, as opposed to, whoa,
good point.
You know they're coachable. And make no mistake about it, a sales manager's job is to coach their team.
Right. Now
let me give you an example of the opposite of that. I had a meeting in a hotel foyer with somebody a few weeks ago, and a very sheepish looking guy wearing a nice suit and had in his briefcase sat down quite near me, and I thought to myself, he looks like a rep who's about to have a meeting with his sales manager. It was almost written on his forehead. And about 10 minutes later, the sales manager walked in, sat down, they shook hands, had a very brief chat, and then he got out this file about this thick.
Right.
And we started going through it page by page. He said, right, well, you're 2.5% down on your aluminium sheet sales, you're 3% down on your tin sales, you're 4% down on your this sales, you're 2% up, well done on those sales. And they went through this huge, great file.
Oh, bless.
What was that all about? No coaching.
So it's just figure bashing.
Make sure you hit your targets next month. Shook hands.
So it's just number bashing, figure bashing, and then that's it.
Crazy.
And they're often, I've heard managers and salespeople say about that scenario, that's quite common. And the company's kind of resolution to get over those salespeople that are always slightly missing their target is, let's put in incentives.
Different people are incentivized differently by different things. Some people are incentivized by money. Some people are incentivized by being recognized. I remember one fantastic sales girl who worked for me years ago, and her biggest incentive was getting a hug at the end of the week.
fantastic.
Come on, Mary. Let's have a
That's
hug.
going
Well
back to
done.
what you said about behavioral analysis and actually understanding what the needs are of people.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So where's the next? Where's the next question from? Following on from that, that would actually then lead me to asking, what's the most important thing salespeople need to understand then, and what it is they get paid for? Because not often everyone knows their own behaviours. They kind of think, well, you know, I'm driven by money, when in actual fact it is actually driven by recognition.
I think probably one of the most important things is to recognize you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 nose and 1 mouth, and you use them in those proportions. You've got to understand your client, their business. You must know the business they're operating in, because ideally what you're doing is you're going out, unless you've got a product like a pen and everybody uses a pen, and I've got the best, cheapest pen in the world, how many do you want? But most people aren't in that type of business anymore. I tend to work mainly with people who are selling very high-priced products or services, but the same applies to everything. We're there to identify problems that either they never knew they had, or problems they knew they had and are looking for a solution for right now, which means you're probably there too late. And problems that they are got so used to, thought were insoluble, and have just decided to live with them.
So how do you break through those, though?
You have to know the questions you need to ask to identify those problems. I mean, if I was, for example, coming to sell you sales training, one of the questions I might ask you is, what are the biggest challenges you're facing with your sales team today? I probably know most of them.
Right.
I don't want you talking about them.
Okay. Hello, Laurie.
Hello.
You've made some really, really fantastic comments in the side.
I've really been enjoying what Bruce is saying, because it's absolutely true. I was in sales for a really, really long time. And there's a lot of bad hiring practices out there. And I was a sales manager. I coached team before it was cool, back in the 90s. So, but yeah, thank you, Bruce.
Okay, because you've been in sales then obviously for such a long time. And it's a question for both of you, is you must have seen some good changes over the years.
It's very interesting because one of the things I talk about sometimes when I'm speaking at conferences or running sales masterclasses, I say, I keep hearing that selling has changed. And I go right back to my original definition of selling, which I wrote 20 years ago, which is exposing companies and individuals to problems they maybe never knew they had, to opportunities they never knew existed, etc., etc. So what's changed? I'll tell you what's changed for a lot of people. It's the very last sentence or few words in my definition, which was helping them to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many people do not. They protect what they've got, and they don't ask for the business. They don't nudge them gently into purchasing. And people need help in making a buying decision. But one thing has changed massively, and that is the advent of the internet. Because 14 years ago, it's about 14 years, I think 14, 15 years since Google started to become mainstream. Prior to that, you knew very little about the customer or potential customer you were going to see, because it was very difficult to get that information.
Oh, but you worked really hard to do it.
I'm sorry?
You worked really hard to get that information.
Yeah, you had
back
to
in
work.
the day. It was
I
like
always
being
phoned
a
the sales
spy.
department. If anything I wanted to know about the company, I phoned the sales department.
Yep.
He said, I need some help. I'm coming to see your boss. Can you tell me a little bit about your company, for example? And I've always got the answers. So you knew very little about them. They knew very little about you and couldn't find out anything because they couldn't log onto the internet and check you out. They knew very little about your competition either. And so actually things were a lot easier in those days. Now, if you've got an appointment, you can be pretty damn sure they've checked out the competition. If they know what the problem is that they want solving, they've checked out the competition, they've checked out you, and you've got to be far, far better now at selling than you ever had to be 20 years ago.
But the same thing is still applying today as it did back then, I think, which is still having the ability to pick up the phone in the first place. Because too many salespeople I've seen are hiding behind emails, email automation, sending out brochures, sending out anything and everything, than actually picking up the phone until they get the call, can you come and see us?
I could rant and rave about this for ages. They're scared.
They're scared.
The average salesperson hates rejection, even though they're in sales. And the number one thing that I try and get across to, I don't try and do anything, I do get across to people, is understand what you get paid for. You get paid to handle the no's.
Yep.
Any idiot can handle a yes. That's easy. Thank you. You get paid to handle the no's and keep going.
And it's not personal. You know, I moved into product development because I do enjoy sales, but I like creating products better, and service offers those types of things. And coming from sales, it makes it easier to create the right products and service offers. And not a lot of people want to do this work. So it's like, but anyway, why not, right? Us introverts who can be really good salespeople. But I'm going to agree on that. You aren't paid for the no's. And it's never, ever personal, even when it appears to be, because they can't possibly know you unless you've built a relationship. So
and it's not always
it's next.
What they mean is not now or not yet.
Yeah.
So you don't wipe them out of your prospect database. You keep going back and you keep doing a few more no's. I actually get people to work out how much they earn for each no.
That's brilliant.
Records, they should know how many calls they make every week, or they can get it off their system, how many appointments they have to make, how many appointments to make a sale, and you can work it back and you can figure out that every no you got earned you X amount of money. Absolutely. And sometimes, it can be 40, 50 pounds a no. Or it doesn't matter if it's 9 or 10 pounds a no. I say to them, okay, if I paid you £9 every time you picked up the phone, what time would you get in the morning? How many coffee breaks would you take? How long would you take for lunch? And what time would you go home?
That's a good way of looking at it. But then I think Phil's made a very good point, which is he thinks that people are more sensitive to rejection now. Is that because of all our social media and the fact that we've been able to hide behind things and people just don't
I am so
they don't
tired
have that
of that
skin anymore?
No, I'm so tired of the social media argument. I've been online since 1996, and before that, remembering very well, and being an American who traveled abroad very young. I lived in England at 18. And that's why I love you guys. Come on and listen to your show all the time. But it hasn't changed. People are just as sensitive as they ever were. I had crying and sobbing salespeople on my team when I was a very young sales manager at 24 years old when I lived in the Middle East. And these people would be, literally 10 years older than me, sobbing because, they'd had 20 no's that morning.
Oh, tough.
Yeah, it can be. It just depends on who it is. And so, no, I don't think it is social media. I think we make social media the excuse, and people don't do the personal development necessary to gain that resiliency,
Okay,
because
so
that's what it takes.
So it's coming back to what you were saying earlier, Bruce, about mindset, because I can remember my early days into sales, and I picked up the phone and I asked to speak to and put through to somebody, and the gatekeeper kind of really was not a very nice lady and slammed the phone down on me. It was like, oh. So I went away, had a cup of coffee, did what most salespeople do, is, oh my God, went back. But unfortunately, because I was emotionally thrown, want for a better phrase, I forgot to move the database on. And I actually called back the same company 15 minutes later, and I was speaking to the same gatekeeper asking the same question, but she was actually really nice as pie. And that's when it clicked for me. It was like, okay, they might have just had something happen. They've gone down the phone. I got it full blast. Now she's feeling better. The next person who phoned her got the lovely, lovely side of her. And that's when I kind of learned, okay, it can be, it's a no, not this right this minute. And not that it's just you.
The mindset. It's all back to the mindset. You use the term gatekeeper. So the moment you hear that voice on the phone, and it's not Mr. Smith, it's Joan somebody or other, your mindset changes. You go into defensive mode. You're now in battle. You've got to do the tap dance routine. Think of them as the door opener. Change the mindset.
Not gatekeeper, they're a door opener.
And have a really good, they're taught to do, they've got a routine. I call it the tap dance routine, because you try and tap dance about it. Who are you? What's your company name? What's it about? Does he know you? I mean, that's what they're taught to do. It's their script. You have to have a better script. And you can either do something really ridiculous, which I teach people to do, which actually gets them through to the decision maker if they're in, around about 75 to 80% of the time. So the moment they answer the phone, instead of them asking you a question, you say, hi, who am I speaking to? And when they answer, you say, hello, Mary, or hello, Paul. John Smith's not in, is he?
Okay.
Another call. Yeah, he is. Oh, so he's just taken another call then? No. He's just gone into a meeting, Mary? No. Great, I'll take it. It works so often. And the other thing that you need to do is you have to have a really good opening statement or question. They're not necessarily going to answer your questions, but if I were to call you and say, I'd like to speak to John Smith, please, what's it about? I'm working with 4 companies working in the identical sector to you at the moment, all of whom are experiencing the same 3 challenges. I'd like to have a quick chat with him, see if he's having the same problems, and see whether or not we could help him if that's the case. Okay. Do you think John wants to know the problems his competitors are having?
That's a good one.
Probably.
Yeah.
But without being threatening, being nice. Think of them as the door opener, not the gatekeeper.
Well, it's quite interesting you're saying about with dealing with the door openers. I'm going to adopt that new phrase as opposed to gatekeeper. And because there are people that go out and say, well, what you need to do is be officious with the gatekeeper and say, I'm not talking to you. You're too low level. I need to speak to your boss because I'm a boss and I don't deal with your level.
Well, that's crap. Okay, let me tell you, gatekeepers, door openers, PAs, whatever you want to call them, they are normally highly qualified people. They've not been hired because they're horrible, nasty people who are there to ruin the livelihoods of salespeople. They're very efficient. They know what their bosses need. They're there to protect their boss from unnecessary calls and to put calls through that they think would be important to them. And very often they're actually running several people's diaries, running the company when the boss is out with his mistress or the boss is out with her toy boy. And they are not nasty, horrible, stupid people. You can't treat people like that.
So that leads very nicely on to then, how do you introduce yourself to a prospect on the telephone? Let's say I have treated the door opener very, very nice, and she then thinks, yeah, okay, I'm going to put you through to the boss. That is when I then see people fold, or they kind of then suddenly go into this script, and you can hear the other person at the other end is kind of going, nah, not for me, and they're switched off. So what is the best way that once you've had a lovely introduction in to carry on?
Well, let me tell you what not to say, first of all. These are some of the things that aggravate me extremely. And for example, hello, is that Cindy?
Yeah.
Yes. How are you today?
Fine.
That question irritates me. The only stranger who's got the right to ask me that question is a doctor. It's insincere. They couldn't care less how you are today. So why ask the damn question? Am I interrupting? Why would you want to bring the word interrupt into somebody's mind? This is not a sales call. Crap, why are you phoning them?
Well, I always say that if somebody says to me, how are you today? And it's a conversation like that they've just come through, the thing that goes on in my mind straight away is, okay, what do you want? What are you after?
Yeah, it's insincere.
Right.
I'll tell you a great way to open the conversation. And it's simply to say, John, I'm Bruce King, and this is a sales call. Would you like to hang up now?
So you're actually honest.
Now, what happens is one of two things. Either there is a complete dead silence.
Yeah.
Because nobody's ever said that to them before. And they're not quite sure how to handle it, in which case I'll pause for 5 seconds, then I'll continue. Or they'll laugh and say, go on then.
But at least then you've captured them there again.
I've told the truth. I've established some rapport. There's a little bit of humor in it. I've come across as very professional. Nevertheless, the way I've said it. Now my next question is, okay, give me 20 seconds to tell you why I'm calling, and then you can decide whether or not you want to continue the conversation with me. Is that fair?
So it's what you've done is you've got a 50-50 chance of whether they say yes or no in the first place.
No. It's 90%.
I guess out of that 50% that said yes, I will still carry on listening because you're being honest, with it being a sales call. But you're giving them a time frame. You're actually saying, yeah, it's only going to take a small time.
No more than 5% of people ever hang up.
Oh, wow. That's excellent.
They're silent and I carry on, or they laugh and I carry on. Give me 20 seconds to explain to you why I'm calling, then you can make the decision whether or not you want to continue this conversation or end it. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Now I've got to have something very powerful to say, which probably brings me back to I'm working with 2 or 3 other companies in your sector, all of whom are experiencing significant problems, and which we've been able to help them with. So the reason for my call was to see if you are having similar challenges and whether or not we could help you too. Would you like me to continue?
That's powerful stuff, putting it from that way. Because what you're doing is you're saying, right, there are negatives out there, but we're going to highlight it and let's deal with it and put it on the table. Are you interested? Because everyone that I know from sales is always about, let's sell the benefits. You've got to sell the features. You've got to feature bash and product bash, and the only way you can do it.
You've got to know what the problem is, first of all. You can't sell a benefit until you know what the problem is.
But most people don't like highlighting the problem because that's a negative. And not very many people are very good at negative selling.
If I ask you, what are the 3 biggest challenges you'll have? If I say to you, how's things going? How's business? You'll say something really positive. If I say to you, what are the biggest challenges you are experiencing with your sales team right now? You'll tell me the truth. If you've got any challenges.
Right. And even if I didn't have challenges in my mind, well, from an outsider or somebody else's point of view, I might not have challenges, but in my mind, because I'm always looking for the next step and increasing growth, there's always going to be challenges.
I can always ask you more questions. So if you say, well, I don't think we've got any real problems. Now, tell me, are your people getting sufficient referrals, or are they spending too much time calling on the telephone, cold calling on the telephone?
Okay.
Well, I suppose we could be doing, we're getting more referrals. You have to know the questions to ask to identify the problems.
And that's the key. Most people don't know the questions. So how do we learn about how do you ask the right questions?
I guess you hire me to teach you how to do it.
Or your book, Think and Grow.
Yeah, whatever.
Yes.
Anybody, almost anybody, can be taught to sell. And what's really interesting, in fact, is that there's one company that I was doing some work for in New York last year, and they gave up hiring salespeople.
Okay.
Because they had the same problem, 65% or more failed. Half of them never met their targets, their quotas anyway, and they took on a completely different tack. And they recruited people, graduates, straight from university. They wanted intelligent people. They wanted people who could prove they had guts and determination, so they tended to go for sports people who trained regularly, and were very successful. They wanted determined, committed people that they could teach how to sell. And that totally transformed their business.
Okay, so there's actually going back to the basics really then.
Getting the right people in the first place.
So going back to the behaviour then.
Who are coachable, people who are determined, people who are ambitious, people who are able to learn, put things into practice. That's top sports people from top universities. And they paid them a damn good salary as well. But they had to learn fast. And you can't keep people, which most companies do. They keep people on way longer than they should do. If somebody is failing and they're not coachable, they've got to go. Do yourself a favor and do them a favor.
Absolutely. And I think people don't do that because I think in some of the companies I've been in, it's sort of like, well, you have your probation period and we'll give you the probation period. If they have like a bit of an ounce of getting there, they extend the probation period and move on and on and on. And the probation period gets longer and longer and longer. Or you've got the other way, which is they don't give them any time whatsoever and get rid of them after a day or 2 days saying, well, you won't make it.
Well, the cost of hiring is normally very high. So to my mind, it all comes back to the beginning, which is hire the right people.
Yes.
Which is where we started. You know, it's look at the CVs, they're all rubbish.
Yeah.
They're written by the person themselves or a professional CV writer. So how can you believe that? No point in looking at references because everybody's petrified of giving a bad reference and having problems as a result of that, legal challenges or otherwise. we've got to do a behavioral analysis. We've got to have a proper HR person or HR trained person interview them in the first place. We've got to teach the sales managers how to interview people and select only the best. And ideally, if we have an existing sales team, we need to be benchmarking our top people so that we know what we're looking for.
But then as long as they're benchmarking them on the right things and not getting hung up on the sales and the figures and the numbers, and it's back to behavior, attitude, and the skills that you're looking for, the basic ones.
Which all come out in the end result anyway, which is the sales figures. I take my top 10 salespeople, I benchmark them, I do a behavioral analysis on them, I benchmark them, and that is what I'm looking for. That's the pattern I'm looking for when I hire somebody else, if it's for a similar position. You don't hire hunters to do a farming job. You don't hire farmers to do a hunting job. You've got to get it right because it's too expensive to get it wrong.
And people do. And they do.
5% plus of the time.
Wow. But then is that because HR are also getting in the way and they're causing some of the problems as well as not really swiftly solving them?
I don't know. I couldn't answer that because that's far too general a question to put entirely on the heads of the HR people.
Okay. No, fair enough comment. Okay. So you went back to, or when we was actually talking about getting through to the prospects and stuff, one of the things that I find often is you've dealt with the door opener, they've said go through, and then you actually end up in voicemail. Now, I've heard of some people say, yes, you must always leave a voicemail. Others say, no, don't leave a voicemail.
Always leave a voicemail.
Okay. Now, what would that look like? Because somebody once taught me is what you do is, hi, I'm Cindy and I'm calling from, and then you sort of like stop mid-sentence and put the phone down.
It's a sneaky trick. Most people know it. Most buyers have a lot more experience of buying than most salespeople have of selling. Okay? So you can't do that. Yes, you leave a voicemail message because it's your opportunity to start getting your professionalism across, your brand image across, and the start of your message across to them. But first of all, there's the rule of 1 in 40. Even if you leave a brilliant message, unless they have a problem they are looking to solve at the time, you've got 1 chance in 40 that brilliant message will be returned.
Okay.
And most people quit after 1.
As low as that?
Well, think about people who called you and left voicemail messages. How often do they call back?
I think that depends on the organisation. Because I've been in, I went to one of these call centres, and their system was showing that the telesales or the tele people were having to call people back 20 or 30 times. And I said, look, this is ridiculous. If you can't get through to somebody after that amount of times, you take the hint. And they're saying, no, we have to keep going till we get through to somebody.
You're talking about a very specific type of organization there. I think I'm talking more about salespeople who should be spending most of their time with their customers, with potential customers, selling to them, supporting them, whatever. I'm not talking about a call center operation.
Right.
So if we're talking about the salesperson who has to make some cold calls, because cold calling is still an essential business call, yes, they should always leave a voicemail message. Remember the rule in 1 in 40. And the rule of 1 in 7. The rule of 1 in 7 is if you leave 7 really good voicemail messages, each building on your story bit by bit, but still under 25 seconds, you will get a call back by the 7th at the latest.
Okay, so that's basically going back to the 7, was it the 7 touches kind of scenario?
Yeah, maybe about a week apart, maybe 4 or 5 days apart, one at the beginning of the week, one at the end of the week, one in the middle of next week.
But some good time in between.
But 7 excellent messages. You're continuously reinforcing your name, your professionalism, your image. You'll get the call returned.
Well, I think you've just answered Melanie's question, because she said, why leave your brilliance on a voicemail for them to know and have the opportunity to ignore?
Hence how powerful your message is, doesn't it? If I left a message to say I'm working with several companies in your area, all of whom have been experiencing the same 3 challenges, I wanted to just have a quick chat with you to discuss whether or not you're having a similar problem, and if so, how we might help. Give me a call back, please, on. Look forward to speaking to you.
Right. Yes. So it's that is core, though, is having that right message, which we always need to have the right message. And I think they now call it the elevator pitch, because even when you go networking, you always have to have the right message and the right elevator pitch and the right way of the problem that you're solving. So how do we get to that?
Study other people's excellent elevator pitches, read books on sales and marketing, write. You know, when I write, everything starts with a script as far as I'm concerned. I've got to look at what I'm writing, what I'm going to say, look at every word very carefully and rehearse it until it becomes me. And it's so powerful that people will respond. You can't just wing it. And the most amazing thing, and I see this all the time when I'm doing any work in-house with a company, I listen to people on the phone and they get a voicemail. They've been in sales for 10, 15 years and they still don't know what to say. They hang up because they're flustered that they've got to leave a voicemail message. Why would you not know precisely what you are going to say when you get put through to voicemail?
So, right. But then that comes down to the idea that you've got to have a whole script and memorize the script and understand it. And I've seen people that have done that route. And when they do get to talk to somebody because they've prepared themselves for going through to a voicemail, they actually get thrown. And the worst one is when they're not listening to the person at the end of the phone who's saying, look, just cut through the script. Just tell me the bottom line. Tell me direct.
Okay, let's look at this script thing for a moment. Picture the scene. You're at the Globe Theatre. You're there for the opening night of Twelfth Night, one of Shakespeare's greatest plays. You're really excited. There's a buzz in the audience. And what you don't know is that behind the curtains on the stage, one of the actors turns around to the other and says, you ever done Twelfth Night before? And he said, yeah. The guy replies, yeah, I did it at college years ago. I'm sure some of it will come back to me. Another one says, yeah, I did it at college about 15 years, 20 years ago. I know quite a bit of it. And of course, what happens is the curtain goes up, they go on stage, and it's a total disaster.
Right.
Yep. What happened was Shakespeare sat down and he wrote his play. But he didn't just write it straight off and that was it. He wrote it, he reread it, he went down to the tavern, had a few jars, and took a look at it from a slightly different perspective. And he rewrote it again and he tidied it up and he rewrote other bits. And it took him a long time to write this play. And when he'd written it, he got a bunch of actors together and he put them on the stage and he handed them a script. I had one each. He said, right, now read it to each other. And as they read it to each other, he made some more changes.
Right.
And they learned the script. And once they'd learned the script, they started putting the body language into it. And they put the feelings into it. And it wasn't a script anymore. They became the part.
So it's
Exactly the same with sales. You've got to have a process that you can stop at any time, move on to another part of the process. But if you don't know the road you want to take your prospect down, if you don't know the question to ask to expose the opportunities and the problems, and you don't know the questions to ask that will enable you to present your solutions, and you don't know the questions you're going to ask for the business, you're not going to make many sales.
And that is so true. I am sitting here thinking of all the scenarios of the bad salespeople, because they get so far down that road. You put in all the work of producing the scripts, tightening them up when they're on the phone or chatting or this, that, and the other, so you can hear them in action. And then they kind of start seeing this lazy option and, oh, actually, I don't need to do the script anymore because I can just send all the information. And then they stop thinking about the script and thinking, well, what's the easiest way I can do is I'll just send them, instead of 3 bits of information, I'll send them 10 and say, you pick. And they actually literally do stop thinking about the sales anymore. As far as they're concerned, the sales stops with them just actually asking the question of, let me send you all the info.
I've got so much info I could send you, Cindy. I'd like to spend at least another 10, 15 minutes asking you a few more questions so I really understand your business and what would be most relevant to send you. Better still, let's pencil in a meeting. No, let's firm up a meeting and let's sit down. I like to meet people face to face, get to understand their environment a little better. How's next Thursday at 2:00 for you?
So it's using the call to action.
Yeah.
Yes, and as
without being pushy, without being nasty, very laid back, very professional, but I know what I want and I know how I can sell best.
So that comes back down to the visualization. What's the point of picking up the phone in the first place? What is it you actually want to come as an outcome? So it starts right back when you said you've got to start thinking like a salesperson and thinking about what it is you want to do to grow. Yeah. We come full circle.
Quite unintentionally, but well done for bringing that around.
Thank you very much for today. I really, really found it informative.
Thank you.
I've been on for an hour, and I know I could learn so much more from you. So would you be open to do another one of these?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Okay. You have a great day.
Will do.
Every day.
Oh, certainly will.
How do I switch this?